What a beautiful view in front of me.
Hey,
Dude,
what's up, bud?
How you doing, guys?
Good, man. How are
I
you?
love this. This makes me very happy that I was curious, am I going to have like two of you on opposite ends of the ranch, or am I going to have
No,
two of you at once? I love this.
we came together to see you,
we're
man.
a team, man.
It-
So we have what, 350, 390, something like that on the fintechs that do a banking function. So let's define fintech.
okay.
Man, there's a bazillion. And when you get down to the ones that we really want to talk about and the ones we really want to focus on are the ones that perform a banking function.
Meaning you need to rent a charter.
Exactly. So I'm going to,
Not that you'd ever say that to a regulator, but yeah.
Right.
so I have, I want to issue a debit card for my company or for my cool thing that I'm doing here, we call it Chime, right?
Perfect.
And I need a bank to perform the back end functions, whether that be, like Cross River, doing the
lending
side where we can run those loans into the banking system and do it on a fee basis. It really sets up a way to earn non-interest income, fee income in a unique way. And I'm talking big dollars.
Well, we've seen those numbers jump up, man. At this point, I think we got as high as close to 400, around 350 now, right? But the cycle continues. And so we're tracking a lot. What's going on the fintech side, right? What does that market share look like? And I mean, tons of VC funding. It is about the time you think it's incredible, it like doubles, right? And so you've got this really vibrant fintech community that needs a bank partner, sponsor bank. And you've also got this other group of sponsor banks, right? That's been growing up. And that's really Zach's background of really one of the most successful ever with MBKC. And certainly early days, I mean, that was probably 5 years ago. That was pretty frontier stuff, I mean, that was a good ways back.
Well, what's neat, everybody? You've got a guy sitting here that was in the early origins of all of this, and I'm really dying to hear, after your crazy meetings and how you guys got started there. How did you evolve this thing and keep the balance between deposits and assets and all of that kind of thing, so that you could actually work this thing up to where it's been or where it's come to?
It's the funny part about community banking to me is it's all very simple and it's all incredibly complicated, right? Every piece of it is so damn straightforward and every piece of it is so damn intricate and complicated. There's so many moving parts, right? So the part that I got to focus on at the bank was the fun part. I got to focus on growth. I got to focus on how do we build deposits? How do we go out there and do some of these partnerships like Betterment, right? Doing the debit card there. How do we even build a brand that makes John Stein at Betterment give a shit to have a conversation with you as a bank, right? These fintech companies, to your point, have pretty much their pick of the litter, right? A lot of banks are kind of bending over backwards to get these groups, and MBKC was never really willing to bend over backwards, but they were willing to have conversations. So I was consistently on the fun side. I would say all the balancing to your point, Dave, is, that happened in boardrooms, that happened in situations above my pay grade that I got to not worry about in a lot of cases, but Brian did get to worry about and Eric did get to worry about. So I got to go out there, do the fun shit, invest in early stage companies, help them grow, hopefully get us some later stage deals. And then, when it comes to, well, is this a broker deposit or not? The extent of my interest in conversation there was like, what's a broker deposit? Right? Because there's just so much to learn. And I came from this fintech world where we're doing robo advising and all this shit. And now we're moving into this world. Like, I didn't know banking. No, understanding a banking balance sheet is something that takes decades, at least from my experience. Like, anybody that can actually pull that shit apart and be helpful with it didn't learn it yesterday. So I would give all of the credit to the MBKC executive team and like 1% of the credit to my crazy ass running around the United States. But it's hard, and
they all know you, right?
I love it.
Well, I think that's one of the things that Brian, I think, did right, was like he separated, he took the industrial revolution a step further and separated the labor economy, right? He was like, Zach, go do all this shit, executive team, make sure he doesn't fuck it up too bad. And then, we'll have a balance of assets and liabilities, hopefully. But I just got to do the fun shit.
But I think you hit something super cool though. Like, how do you as a bank build sort of the fintech brand of a sponsor bank? I think it's so important, right? It's something we're seeing a lot of. I'll give you a great example, man, looking at like media contacts from banks, right? And you look at like their social presence, they're actually marketing that they're a part of the fintech ecosystem. they're not marketing freaking checking accounts. That's such a different dichotomy.
This is great. So
You're
here's
building a brand around fintech.
This is why, because there's so much money to be made right now. Let's go.
And lost, just to be clear. You mentioned VCs earlier. There's plenty to be lost too, but yes, there is plenty to be made.
You know, in the crazy conversations we have, everybody's like, well, what if the fintech doesn't work out? I'm like, get another one. It's not that big a deal, guys. So in the early days of this process, when it was kind of a little more accidental, we fell into this thing. Well, now it's a standard. And so banks are coming in and going, how do we set one of these up? And I'm like, well, you damn sure don't want to set it up the way it was done the first time, because that was pretty accidental. So what you really end up with is I'm trying to strive towards something as an outcome. There's a better way to get there. We can show you some better ways to get there. This is really cool. So, you know, talked to a guy the other day. They have over 1,000 fintechs, and they're going to add like 20 something, 24, whatever. I think same situation that can be said for each of these. So you're seeing a specialization of sponsor banks at this point. You know, hey, we're really good at account. We're really good at prepaid.
So you mean like Cross River plays loans. You got Lincoln's Image, you got Meta on the prepaid side, right?
And so fintechs kind of go do their little specializations with 3 or 4 of these different folks, which screams to everyone, if you're going to add 25 and you've got over 1,000 to choose from, there's a lot of room left to grow here for sponsor banks.
Absolutely.
Now, the trick to getting past the board approval is getting it into a compliant process.
Yep.
I'm not saying anything about MBKC or anybody else, but
no, it's just true in general.
Hard, but you know how they evolved over time and how we can do it today is completely different.
I have banks coming to me and they're like, we want to play this game. I've talked to so-and-so, I've looked at this, and it's people that you really look up to. But the way that they did it X number of handful of years ago, that's not the right way. It's not what we would want to do today, certainly if you want to get scale. And I think that's back to your path, man. So what do you think there?
Well, you lived through the painful processes.
And you're working on solving those painful things.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, there's the bond commercial of, or like the banking as a service embedded finance commercial of like, you pick a platform, that platform has multiple banks, and that's kind of the direction. I mean, that's the only logical direction from my point of view, without $150 to $200 million in venture funding, right? You need unbelievable amounts of venture funding if you want to build it yourself and actually have any hope to spend anything on marketing and everything else that comes along with being a company the size, paying for a chief compliance officer to have these conversations with the bank. So I think there's that aspect of it where you pick the platform that makes the most sense for your specific use case. We're rebundling multiple banks on the same platform. It makes more sense, right? But I think the bigger point here, especially focusing on community banks, is when was the last time a community bank got to choose the way they wanted to do something, right? When was the last time that they got the fucking the generous hand that, you know, they got the good side of things, right? Look at what's happened with COVID and their ability to lend. I mean, it's not like they were taking good guidance, you know, it's not like they had any clue what they were actually going to be able to write off at the end of it. They just did it because that was the right thing to do for their community. And I think that's the larger thing here, right? Is like, yeah, there's technology platforms out there, there's everything else, but I think the most interesting part of all this is the past, we can all agree, could have been done better. The future that I'm most intrigued about is less so, you know, Cross River's great, Sutton's great, MetaBank's great, WebBank's great, you know, you name them all, MVB, all the NBKC, all of these banks are wonderful. What I'm super curious about though is these other 3,500, these other 4,000 that get a chance to start fresh, right? Mm-hmm. They get a chance to actually think this through from first principles and do it the right way. Whereas MBKC was just like dealt a hand and we were playing poker and we were doing the best we can with it, right? You have so much to learn it and then go do it right. But I think the most important part is like, go fucking do it. And excuse my French, but that's the thing that drives me most insane with banks sometimes is that like, they'll take 4 hours of your time to ask about strategy, and then they won't take even the first step to have the conversation. And I think that was like the differentiator at MBKC was Brian was willing to try stuff, you know, and he was willing to lay his job on the line to try stuff. And that's what it takes, I think, is executives willing to stick their neck out there in the name of, you know, whatever, pick your buzzword, innovation, yada, yada, yada. But it's that next step, that future that's actually exciting.
This is what data gives you, is it gives you the entire infrastructure of all the fintech analytics that we create. We've got all of the banking outcomes of what those things yield. We see where this is done right, where it was done wrong.
Well, so let's talk outcomes. So I can tell you this, as a peer group in community banking, sponsor banks are by a freaking mile so much more profitable than everybody.
Oh, yeah.
They're 1% in every earnings ratio. That's off the charts. I think you also got to look at, to your point, the different ways that it's being done, whether we're talking about, I love this, a real core, an actual bank core, whether we're talking about a payments core, or whether we're talking about a sidecar core, or sometimes called a fintech core, right? So that would be the core pros, the finxacs, those kind of folks, right? Or what I would categorize more as fintech infrastructure, which I think fits more into the bond narrative, right? And more of a banking as a service narrative.
In essence, tell me if you think this is a true statement. There's two ways to do this. One is get a tech team and get
To work.
Get a bunch of ABIs, get a tech team and really get after it that way, which takes a lot of money, like you said, that a lot of banks don't have, or to set up, let's call it a fintech core that can FBO back to your bank core and then handle all of the integration points with all the regulation and, reporting necessary.
Reconciliation.
Do you think that's a fair statement that those are your basic two paths to follow?
I think it's as simple as thinking of it as a party. You're either bringing your own bank, bringing your own booze, or the booze is provided, right? It's almost that simple where Dave's just done.
He's like, I'm done.
He's like, you said that, I'm going to go have a beer. But I think it's that straightforward, and I think I am very non-disciple-ish about this, right? Like wearing my bond hat, there are reasons to go the direction of banking as a service. But if I'm able to raise $200 million, get the right people on my advisory board, get a bank charter moving, I'm like, why would you partner with someone like that? There's constraints that make it so that banking as a service is required even to exist, right? At the end of the day, it would be a lot better if we could all spin up our own charter, do a de novo bank and all that kind of stuff. I don't think most of these tech companies actually understand what that entails or actually want to do it once they get there. But it's there for a reason. And like, we'll see what happens with Varo Bank or Varo or, however you pronounce that.
We're getting creamed. If you saw their call report, they were in a tough spot. And then they raised it, to your point, $1 gazillion. Now the game just got more interesting again, right? It's the capital story. I mean, I literally saw an ad of theirs the other day and I like kind of scoffed at it out of my sheer like fintech nerdery. And my girlfriend was like, why'd you laugh at that? And I was like, it's a good question. I don't even know why I laughed at that. I just kind of scoffed at it because I didn't like, they've just raised so much. How do you play that out? How do you take on $200 million and actually return something sizable to investors? And I guess the answer is like financial services is maybe one of the few places you can do that, but it's tough.
Okay, this is really cool. You two really good points there. One is, if you're again a unicorn, you're a SoFi, right? There's a point where you're going to have to be a bank. You just want to rent out a roadway, and it's almost inevitable. But that's not the preferred path. These guys want to stay under that level, and you can make a lot of money. You get all this capital coming in. Okay, so let's ask this huge question. Somebody please ask this question. Why in the hell is everybody putting this much money into fintech?
And I think the VC's perspective is that it's going to replace the big banks. I don't think the VCs sitting in Silicon Valley, for the most part, sitting in, these huge cities that are, there's as many Starbucks as there are JP Morgan and Wells Fargo branches, right? They see that as the opportunity to disrupt, I think, and truly disrupt, like come in with the classical version of a crappier solution, right? That's actually disruption, is like, this is not as good as the JP Morgan Chase app. But
because actually we're not disagreeing. I totally agree. It is a big bank problem, not a small bank problem. It's a small bank opportunity and a big problem.
I agree.
Can I come full circle?
Real quick, I got to say this, man. This is my favorite line. I love to tell people when Jamie Dimon talks about.
That's who I was going to quote next. Yes, his earning reports and just him in general.
What he's really scared shitless of. Banks get fintech.
So this is my full circle moment. If you have community banks, and we're seeing a bunch, actually I have a note, I think it's 8. I've got 8 on the watch list right now, just from conversations, Zach, that we've had. 8 that are in the process. They've got a fintech and they're soon to go live. So we'll add them to the sponsor bank list. What was the total number on sponsor banks?
69 live. We've got
4 inactive. There's 4 credit unions
we came
sponsoring.
down.
That's it.
Because some of the
And
acquisitions.
69 banks is it?
Yeah,
Well, there was 80 at one point. We've come down because of some of the acquisitions and things like that.
this is hugely
Wow.
important. So those are the banks that are sponsoring those 350 some odd fintechs. But here's what's really interesting. Because of the acquisitions, I think it's something we've not all touched on yet. When they're getting good and they're winning on fintech and they're building that fintech brand, they're getting acquired.
Yeah.
Or they're going public and screwing everything else up. Yeah, I mean, it's
So this is my full circle. If you think about that from this sort of fintech sponsorship perspective, if the community banks go down the sponsoring fintech path, I believe this whole question of is fintech friend or foe, it's the best friend you've ever had.
It is.
This is how fintech and community banking partners together to kill the big 4.
Yep.
Ooh,
And
this is awesome,
the
dude.
best part here is the number one thing that they can't fight you on is Durbin. I mean,
exactly. It's regulatorily implemented.
really what we're talking about here is there's a lot of bankers, community bankers especially, that are, I mean, like crazy excited about this whole concept.
We're hearing
But
it.
what's happening is when they get to the boardroom and we get down to the last mile, or I should say the 1 yard line, right?
Mhm.
It's like, well, can you prove to me this is going to work without any risk? And that's where everybody falls apart, where I think we can come in and help make the data case, help show the path that should have been, like we talked about first principles earlier. We can help you with that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But to your point, and this is, I want to be vociferously loud on this, you don't have to be in a situation where what if one of them fails? There's thousands more to take their place. You don't have to worry about that. The question should be, what if one of them succeeds?
It is the best question. Coming back to the broker deposits question, coming back to all these banks being sub-Durbin. Yeah, the idea of failure, I don't think really even scared us back in the day in MBKC. That was the healthiest thing you can do is assume they're all going to die. You know, that's think of yourself almost as a VC. You know, take away some of the FOMO and the chasing of things, and think of it as, you know, truly you're making an investment, but understand the statistics, to your point, associated with those investments, right? Like I would come to you guys and try and understand that before I went too far down that road, because they're gonna fail. If you don't know that ahead of time, your board's really gonna have questions, right? At that point, it's like, if you don't prepare them for what you're getting into with these companies, it's the slipperiest of slopes, I think.
So there's a lot of aggregators, you know, Plaid types and MX and companies out there that are doing a lot of data aggregation from the client base of the financial institution. And it's like, gosh, if you have this information, what can we do with it? And it's like, here's the news flash, not a hell of a lot. Me knowing more about my client base doesn't give me new products. I have the products that my course provided that I've bought, and so, you know, or that maybe integrates to my mobile or integrates to my core. That's my choices in life as we sit today. That's where I think another
things are opening up.
You know, super opportunity for fintech to you know, begin to play, because the fintech needs to talk to you. He doesn't need to talk to your core.
Well, and this is interesting. We're starting to see, and I hadn't seen this before, Zach, in the last year or so, we've actually got 2 playing on the board of both, because I'm so intrigued by them. They're some level of direct to consumer, and also some level of working with banks in the bank ecosystem.
Okay.
And also to a certain extent, working within those folks to be their sponsors.
He's going to be asking me who. You can't tell me. You can't tell anybody.
But isn't that interesting?
But
it's a hybrid.
It is.
Check it out, man. I want to hear what Zach has to say about what we were just talking about there. Is this right? Is this wrong in your past experience and what you perceive to be the future?
I mean, you know me, I tend to agree with you guys. The thing that I've never understood about the whole situation is how similar in a lot of cases, like the incentives are aligned, but somehow they're always fighting with each other, bankers and VCs. And the one thing that I loved about MBKC, that I wondered why other banks weren't thinking this way, was it's about risk, right? It's about decreasing risk. It's about, I mean, that's what banking is at the end of the day, right? Why not let some VC firm in the Valley that has $2.8 billion and is not going to miss the 50 that they just invested in this company. Why not let them fund the growth of this thing versus, and yeah, broker deposits versus core deposits. Sure. Whatever. But why not let them take the risk and you just receive the balance sheet love from it, right? You're managing a balance sheet. You're managing an income statement. Why not just let that, I mean, if it works or not, you're doing a good thing. You're learning something. And if you have a portfolio, eventually it's going to work.
Well,
and it just didn't, I don't understand why more people don't think that way.
Of the sponsor banks that are doing it, it is working better than anything in the history of banking has ever worked before.
Yeah. When you
That's what the math says, man. I think you nailed it.
I kind of cut my teeth on
free capital. It's growing on someone else's dime. Why not?
Yeah, well, but here's the catch. So we've got the FinTech guy here, super well capitalized. He's ready to roll and do these things. He's going to put this money coming through your bank and out the other side, and you're going to make interchange. You're going to make fee income
deposits.
There's a bunch, whether it's asset side or or card side. But regardless of which path that you choose or both, you're going to make a lot of money without taking the risk. The guy who's well capitalized is over here taking all the risk, and he's just trying to say, can I give you money for you to run this through my bank? This separation that we're talking about right here is exactly what banking as a service is the infrastructure that goes along with that.
Well, and how far to go. And
back to your idea, we talked about the first principles. I'm so glad you brought that up, because now we've got a chance to stand back and say, well, guys, this fundamentally does require a core participation. Okay. And so how do we participate when my core is typically built to run my bank, not all these other things?
I believe
so that's where we've been working in the shadows, I think, for the last 2 years of building that infrastructure piece. We don't build things. We connect people that do.
Partners. Yeah. Partners is a key part, man. I think, look, to me, guys, this looks a lot like branch automation looked, 80s, right?
That was man.
I mean, yeah, look, we need to be able to automate various branches. It's the same thing if we start working with complicated businesses or fintechs, right? I need to be able to automate that. It's a reconciliation, FBO, sub-accounting, right? Subledgering nightmare.
It's a data issue at the end of the day, right? You need everything to settle and reconcile with each other. And it's really easy to talk about. It's very easy to say that this ledger should talk to that ledger. But as soon as you start building into it, as soon as you start digging into it, it ain't, and a lot of it's because of that COBOL and, old school stuff that's stuck there. And yeah, but that's the beauty of this industry. If it was easy, there would be more than 69 banks working in the area, right? If it was easy, all 4,000 community banks or whatever the correct number would be doing it, and they should be, but it ain't easy.
Well, that's what they're relying on us to do, guys. I don't mean us, I mean all of us, is to bring the simpler solutions. I always tell people no one wants to rewire the house, they just want to turn the damn light on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like think of Nest, it's the same thing. It's just, you want it to work. You don't want to have to think about rewiring your entire household. You just want the and that's been one of the biggest problems with FinTech is it's just this UX layer, right? It's just this user experience. Who's actually innovating at an infrastructure level? And we're starting to see that, but a little behind.
I am a huge fan of, look, from our side, playing with the data and just, let's call it peer analysis in FinTech. You guys on the infrastructure side, others playing banking as a service, somehow or another, we're all working in the right direction. Yeah. I am not anti anybody that's working this problem, because love us or hate us, we're all working actually collectively together on behalf of pushing community bank into what we all believe is the furtherment, right? This is the right path to help community banks. So
I agree.
All has the right answer, or maybe a bunch of us do, or maybe it's just different ways of doing it. That's really what I'm finding.
This is what I love about being a data guy. What do you call the bank love? By the way, I'm putting that one all the way in my corner. We didn't talk about income or expenses or risk or any bank love. Get a little bank love.
It's all encompassing.
But yeah, this idea that what's the right way? And it's like, well, what's the right way for you? I think everything's situational. I think, to your point, we all embrace and encompass all of these things, and we all love and share in all of it. But at the end of it all, there is an answer to what is successful, and that's what's revealed in the numbers.
Yeah. But also and I don't want to drag us out any longer, but I almost disagree with you on the that you don't have anything against folks, anyone in this space doing things. I think there are some bad actors, in the fintech space, especially. There's bad actors in the banking space.
Okay, man. Now we're getting to get the bullshit.
I mean, I think it's got to be to the consumer's benefit at the end of the day. To me, is one of the biggest things. I mean, I talk about the balance sheet, I talk about risk mitigation and everything else, but I'm sitting here in Kansas City, the payday lending capital of the world, and I want to burn every one of these damn check cashing places right down. I mean, it's horrid what is happening here. But, and as you know, it's not my first time saying something negative about Robinhood publicly, but look at what they're doing. What they're doing is not usury rates. Maybe it's not the check cashing place at the end of the street, but if you're making $300 million in like 3 months on selling people's order flow, and then you have people committing suicide because they don't understand their options, and then you're offering leverage to folks that just bought one share of Apple, like, are you doing what's actually in the socioeconomic and benefit of the average consumer in America? I don't know.
They did rescue a lot of hedge funds, so that was important.
Yeah, well, which is why I get out of bed in the morning.
Community banks can't compete with the big banks. I actually think they can kick their ass on
Look
the
at
technology
PPP.
front.
Yeah. And like, I'm still an MBKC bank user. I don't, this is the funny part about, I live in fintech. You guys, I mean, you know me, you know how much time I obsess over this industry. You know how much time I spend trying to understand it. And you know what I log into for my online banking? You know what I swipe? I mean, well, I swipe the Apple Card a lot, but what I'm actually using is my MBKC bank account all day, every day, over and over and over again, because there's no overdraft fees. I know I can call down and say, hey, this thing happened and I need some personal, attention about this specific thing. I've been lucky enough to be able to make a couple angel investments. I would not have felt comfortable sending a wire through JP Morgan. Like, my MBKC relationship banker will hold my hand and help me send this wire and then call me as soon as it gets there. I mean, this is not the same thing that we're talking about here, so it's just a totally different world.
I think you nailed so many good points in one sentence right there.
What did we not talk about that's on your mind?
For me, I mean, if I I kind of go back to if I could paint a mural or, buy one gigantic billboard that's on the way to work for every community banker in the United States, that billboard would probably just say, try it. Give it a shot. Take your first step. This is quickly becoming a long billboard, but you know what I mean? It's like, go out there and have the conversation. To the original point about Brian, go out there, have a test case, and the other thing that I should say on top of have the conversation is do the thing you said you were going to do during the conversation. I think that's one of the biggest disconnects here is we can talk about a lot, but if you don't do anything, it doesn't really matter. So I would say get out there, have a conversation. I mean, my God, if you're one of the community banks that's not part of that 69 and you're listening to this, like, whew, you got some opportunity. You have a lot of people that have stubbed their toe on the way to the door a lot of times, and in some cases shot themselves in the foot by accident, not just stubbing toes. Like, we're missing toes by the end of this. Learn from them. Go try something, knowing what has been true in the past. The history doesn't repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes. So go learn and try and make some rhyming income,
We actually put on a conference that's free for bankers, literally to sit down, bankers helping bankers,
and talk about this stuff.
Where people, you want to talk to Brian, you want to talk to Eric, you want to talk to guys like that. That's what they're here for, is to share their information and knowledge. There's no excuse. And
there's not. And there's also no excuse on the fintech side to not be empathetic and to not understand the fact that the person sitting on that other side of that table, you may be the best technologist in the world, but I guarantee you there's something that banker understands that you don't. And
you're right.
Taking a minute to be humble about that. Like, I plan to spend the rest of my life in this industry. I plan to never know everything, because that is just fucking unattainable and a dumb goal. I would rather be sitting in your seats asking people the questions, and like, hopefully I've said something halfway useful throughout all this. But I think if I could say anything in closing is like, be curious and be humble, and the rest of it will come.
The only move that's the wrong move is to not move.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where that's where, really the bad acquisitions happen. And that's where the failures happen. And that's where stale. That's where this brand of community banking that I think you guys are trying to change comes from. You know, this idea that community banks are not as cool, are not doing as much. It's wrong. It's an incorrect perception, you know? And yeah, cool. I mean, yeah. There's some really cool stuff going on out there. There's a lot more cool stuff to happen, but
yeah, if I have to learn, we're going to change it all.
I love it, man. Jack, like literally like one of the people I just love the most, man. You have such a good freaking attitude about things and you're super real. I
get pissed off easily.
Blast hanging out with you, man. I think, look, I shout out to all the fintechs, the community banks, our whole industry. And it's people like you, man, that we need more of. You got a winning attitude and you're out there exploring and having hard conversations. We're all getting our asses kicked. We're also all winning a bunch, right? And not afraid of it and enjoying it. So thank you for riding with the FinTech Cowboys.
Always, guys.
Hey, you ever get your ass near Austin, you better come hang out with us. We got a place for you.
I love you guys. Absolutely. I got to make it to Austin. Some of my heroes are moving to Austin, so I got to make my way down there. As if you guys weren't already my heroes, you know, the stand-up comedy central of the world seems to be developing around you.
We got all the beer ice down, man. Come on.
Let's do it, guys. I love it. Thanks for having me on. This has been a blast. Sometimes I forget that I have opinions until someone asks.
I love it, man. All right, man. Well, let's catch up soon.
Sounds good, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man.